So it's a nice segue with the TED Talk. Now I get to tell a little bit about my story and how I got into homeopathy. I knew nothing about homeopathy. I had a small son, and he was getting chronic ear infections over and over again. And you know what the drill is. You go to the pediatrician, and you get a round of antibiotics, and then you keep going back because the ear infections keep coming back. They tend to, at least they did with my son. And I think he was about 5 years old. And finally, somebody told me about homeopathy. I still don't remember this day who told me. And I found a homeopath in Mountain Lakes, New Jersey, where we lived, and I took him. And the homeopath talked to me, and then she talked to him, and then she prescribed a remedy, a little vial, and gave him the sugar pellets under his tongue, and he never had another ear infection. And I thought, wow, this is kind of cool. That was in 1995. And after that, I thought, this is really kind of interesting, and I was very interested. And the same homeopath actually gave a weekend workshop, a 2-day workshop, Saturday and Sunday, for layperson prescribing for acute issues, which is, unless any of you are professional homeopaths, that would be something that you would do if you could find somebody who gives a session like that for acute prescribing, not chronic, and I'll explain that later. And that was really cool. And then you buy the kit, and you get this kit. Then it was like huge. Now they have them, and they're this big, you know, of a number of remedies, and a materia medica that tells about the different remedies that are possible. And right out of the gate, I was able to help my husband's torn, well, it wasn't torn, it was pulled, Achilles tendon. He pulled it in playing tennis, and he was hobbling around on his leg for about 6 months. And I looked it up, and I said, okay, this is the remedy that you should take. So he took it, and he swears to this day, he said almost immediately he felt like a bubbling in that area. And all of a sudden it was gone, and he was walking fine. Now, that doesn't always happen. You kind of get lucky when you're new at this stuff. But it was the right remedy, and that's the trick. You got to match the right remedy. So it was in 2005. I decided one day, sitting at my desk at work, that I wanted to be a homeopath. And I said, I'm going to go to homeopathy school, and that's what I did. And late in life, I was 54 years old when I started homeopathy school, and it was a 4-year program and a whole lot more difficult than getting a bachelor's degree. But I was much more passionate about it than what I studied in college. And in homeopathy school, you take 4 years, and you take anatomy and physiology, and you take disease and pathology, which are required if you want to get your certification, which you kind of have to do now. That's the way things are leading, and eventually the government is going to come in, and they're probably going to say you can't practice homeopathy unless you're certified, so that they can have a standard. So that was the way that worked. And I've been practicing ever since supervised practice in my 3rd year of school. And it's been nothing less than the ultimate passion of my life. And hopefully all of you can live, long enough to be able to figure out what your real passion is if you haven't figured it out already. And God love you if you knew what it was at age 7, as I sure didn't. So homeopathy. What I promised was to tell you what disease really is. And the entire first year of homeopathy school was devoted to teaching us, the entire first year, teaching us what disease really is, which really stands conventional wisdom on its head. Because we're all taught, all right, you've got a bellyache, you've got an ear infection, you go to the doctor and you get an antibiotic, or you get some medication and pharmaceutical, and you take it, and then the symptoms go away. Enough said. Problem solved. Well, it doesn't really solve the problem. We found out that over a period of time, in increments, learning that is just basically a suppression of disease. There's an underlying cause, and it can be one of probably 3 main things that can be the actual cause of problems. Now, if you have pain in your body, it's basically your immune system trying to tell you there's something wrong. Don't put out the oil light in the car. You see the oil light come on in the car, and you think, well, God, something's wrong, I don't want to deal with it, so I'll just put the oil light out, and now I don't have to worry about it. And that's pretty much what it is when you have a pain. or if your knee starts to hurt, but man, you're determined you're going to continue running around the block, 3 or 6 times, every morning. I'm going to take the Motrin, or I'm going to take whatever, and then I don't feel the pain, so it goes away. Eventually, your body's going to break down. You've got to treat your body well and actually listen to the symptoms, because if you don't, it'll come back with a vengeance. So the 3 main issues and reasons that are underlying causes of disease can be environmental. If somebody in your life is putting uranium under your pillow every night, that's an environmental problem, and you're going to have a problem, and you're going to get sick. The other is suppression, which is actually what happens when people take antibiotics, is a perfect example. You take an antibiotic, and what it does is it actually kills all of the good bacteria with the bad bacteria. And that sets up your immune system for a fall, because about 75%, my understanding is like 75%, who knows how you measure that, of your immune system is actually in your gut. And if you don't have the right balance of flora, you're really going to have a problem. And that's not good. So you've got suppression, you've got environmental factors, in addition to uranium under your pillow by some nefarious person. There's pesticides and we're breathing in mercury. I won't go into detail, it'll just make everybody more horrified, about the environment than we already are, but you get the idea. And then the biggest issue, because those are things that you can identify and you can deal with because it's something tangible. What you think on a regular basis, untrue thoughts, emotions, negative emotions, and we all have them, and we have them spinning in our head like a feedback loop sometimes, some of us worse than others. If you continue to think those negative, untrue thoughts, they will create a problem in your body, depending on what the thought is. Now, why is that, and how can that work? Well, it's a vibration, because what dis-ease really is, everybody listening? What it really is a static vibration. Because the thoughts that you think, whether they're good or they're bad, actually create a vibration. It's a frequency vibration, it's energy. We're all made of bouncing light energy. You think that that disease starts on a cellular level, but it doesn't. The cells are made up of atoms, and atoms, you can say it's on a quantum level, because atoms and what we're drawn, in chemistry class or whatever class it was in science, here's what an atom looks like. You got protons and neutrons and the whole bit. It isn't exactly apparently the way it is, but it's a quantum level stuff of waves and particles, and it's light energy, and that is what we're all made of, including the table and the books and the handouts and my watch and everything else. It's all the same stuff. And it's subject to morphing from energy into material. We actually create the material thing. So if you think thoughts of guilt from the past or anxiety for the future, resentment, jealousy, hatred, you hold that in, and that creates a frequency vibration that actually stimulates neuropeptides in your brain that stimulate hormones that then cascade down your body and actually bombard a system or an organ in your body. And depending on which vibration and which emotion it is, it'll hit a different organ. And eventually, you'll create a functional problem with the organ, and then after that, it'll be a structural problem. You'll end up with cancer or something else. So that's where homeopathy, in addition to just treating physical issues like acute problems, that's where homeopathy excels. It's amazing. Now, there are other energy modalities that work really, really well too. You've got EFT. Ever heard of EFT? Emotional Freedom Technique, all right, where you do the tapping, you set up statements, and you do the tapping. It's moving stuck energy out, and then you get well. And you can cure actually your own allergies using EFT. It's energy, it's moving energy. The other thing, there's acupuncture. Everybody's familiar with that now. It's meridians in the body. And in fact, just as a quick aside, in Chinese medicine, I think they identified 12 or 13 main meridians. There's another gentleman who was an acupuncturist in Australia who decided to study it in China because he said everybody kept asking him, what's qi? And he decided to find out for himself, and he actually identified 36 different meridians. And so there's more to it than we can see with a microscope. But based on how we know we can get healthy using energy, we don't need a microscope. You just use it and you know it's there. So is everybody, I bet you everybody here is familiar with Louise Hay. Yeah. Okay, well, to give you an idea, right at the beginning, some points of my philosophy, she says. And right in the middle it says, we create every so-called illness in our body. Resentment, criticism, and guilt are the most damaging patterns. Releasing resentment will dissolve even cancer. And it will. It absolutely will. I'm not here to say I can cure cancer. I can't cure anything. But I help people heal. So homeopathy, you add that to the list. You've got EFT, you've got acupuncture, you've got Reiki, and I'm sure there are a lot of other energy modalities. Those are the things that actually do work, depending on what your intuitive sense says you're drawn to. But the homeopathy, to me, is the king of modalities. It's amazing, and I love the process. How did it, well, who discovered it, and who invented it, and how did somebody figure it out? Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, have anybody here heard of Samuel Hahnemann? He was a German medical doctor, and in 1750, he discovered homeopathy. He didn't coin it homeopathy, but it's based on the law of similars, which you'll find in every dictionary. Actually, the law of similars, it defines it. And basically, what it is a substance. If you ingest enough of a substance in nature, whether it's animal, mineral, or plant, enough of it, you will actually create bad symptoms. And this is not the dictionary definition, this is the long version. It will, whatever symptoms in substance form it will cause in a person, it will actually heal. So you match basically the vibration. So homeopathy, how Samuel Hahnemann actually discovered it, was he backed out of the medical profession because they were doing bloodletting and they were using mercury and stuff on skin problems. And he said they're harming people. And the oath not to first do no harm, they weren't doing that. So he got out. Now he had 10 kids that he had to support at the time. So he decided to translate medical texts. And he was doing that. And the author of the text said that to cure malaria, he was using cinchona bark. And cinchona tree bark is where you get quinine. And quinine for over like 350 years has been curing malaria. And he thought, well, why is that? So Samuel Hahnemann, being the detective that he was and a very scientific-minded man, he ended up getting some cinchona bark and he ingested it until he felt fever, chills, and diarrhea. And he thought, well, those are the symptoms of malaria. The law of similars was born. Oh my God. And he thought, whoa. So he put two and two together and he just kept going from there. And then he decided, because he knew they were hurting people with toxic amounts of junk that they were doing to people to try to heal things, and they're basically killing people with it. So he somehow figured out that you would take a tiny amount of a substance, you put it in 100 drops of water. It wasn't as quickly as this. In fact, nobody really knows exactly how long it took him to do this and figure out the succussion part. It's dilution and succussion. So C potency, you put 1 drop in 100 drops of water, and then you shake it. You take 1 drop of that and put it in 100 drops of clear water, and then you shake it again. You do it again. You do it again. You do it again. By the time you get to the 30th glass, there's not a molecule left of the original substance. And that's only a 30C, and that's what you can buy in Whole Foods in the boron vials. So you keep going, and the total paradox, it's just so wonderful. The farther away you get, the more dilute you become, the more powerful and deeper it goes to heal the body. Like, why? I don't know. I mean, who knows? But that's the way it works. So you get, there are a lot of different potencies. In any event, that was Dr. Hahnemann and the law of similars, and it's individualized medicine, homeopathy is. Otherwise, I think that's the reason why most medical doctors would be doing it if it wasn't so difficult. It takes a lot of time. You have to sit with a person for the first time, maybe about 2 hours. And you listen to them, and you listen, it's based on the experience of their symptoms. how they experience symptoms and how they experience life. And no two people, you take 3 people with malaria, and they're going to require a different remedy, and it's not going to be quinine. It depends on how they describe what they're feeling and experiencing with their illness, and they'll be given 3 different remedies because it has to do with, that's basically it. I won't go any deeper than that, but it's then there are possible 4,000 remedies out there. I think there are homeopathic remedies. It could be anything in nature, anything, animal, mineral, plant, and beyond. Now, there was a Dr. Constantine Herring back in Hahnemann's time who was a little bit younger than he, and the medical profession, the standard conventional medical profession at that time, did not like the idea of homeopathy. They didn't like Samuel Hahnemann, and they scoffed at him, and they gave him a hard time, which made Hahnemann incredibly angry. But what they did was actually they got together, and Constantine Herring was one of them, the doctors, and they said, all right, you're the guy that we're going to have as the spokesman to denigrate homeopathy, to get it off the map, because we don't like it. And he said, okay, but first I've got to study it to see what I'm talking about. Smart move. So he studied it, and he became the best advocate and disciple of Samuel Hahnemann. And he went on. I've got a whole set of books. I mean, now they're all on software, but a whole set of books with 50 provings of substances that Constantine Herring did. Provings, meaning like drug provings, so that you can see what it causes, and then you'll know what it cures. Dr. Constantine Herring also developed something you can Google, and it's called Herring's Law of Cure. Herring's Law of Cure is, he noticed that when people were doing, he was giving them homeopathic remedies, and they were moving in a healing direction, that the symptoms will be aggravated for a short time. The physical symptoms will be aggravated. On a mental emotional level, because you go on the totality, you always prescribe on the totality of symptoms, the mental, the emotional, and the physical. You never just do, oh, you have a sore knee, here, take this. That's suppression. I mean, you might as well give somebody an ibuprofen. It's good for, it's probably better than the ibuprofen, but and more natural, but you're not getting to the underlying cause, which is the mental, emotional, and the physical. Uranium under the pillow notwithstanding. Herring's Law of Cure is when people are getting better, the movement of the symptoms will go from inward, outward, from more important organs to lesser important organs, from the top down. So if you have a rash, it's going to move down the body, not up. That's the wrong direction. You know you got a problem when that happens. It's going down from the top down and in reverse order of their coming, meaning the most recent symptoms that are being expressed are the first ones that will go away. And then the immune system will be stimulated by that homeopathic remedy to go back through old symptoms, and they'll start to recur. Like for instance, a client that I had once never told me that she had, in the initial session, she never told me that she had strep throat 4 times a year for all 4 years that she was in college. And she came for the first follow-up. She took a remedy. You just take it once, and then you wait 4 weeks. You have a follow-up. You let it unfold. It's energy. It's not a suppression, so you have to keep taking it. And she came back, and she said, well, about 2 weeks after I took the remedy, I ended up with this sore throat, and it felt just like the strep throat that I used to get when I was in college. And I started to cringe, and just waiting for it. And she said, so I went to the doctor. No. And she said, but he looked in my throat, and he said he couldn't see anything. And so I went home, and it went away in a day. That's a recurrence of old symptoms. And you've got a really good match with a remedy when that happens. And she'll never have that again. But it was something, those strep throats were suppressed by antibiotics. And when they're suppressed, it ends up going deeper into the body. You end up sicker and going into a deeper level. And what does deeper mean? You've got 2 lungs, you've got 2 kidneys, you've got 1 liver. The liver is really important. I mean, if something happens with the lungs, it's not good either, but at least you have 2 of them. And in fact, a good example of the direction of cure is little kids, babies who are born, and inevitably sometimes have a skin rash, whether it's called eczema or whatever. And what we automatically do is go to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician says, okay, here's a cream, put a cortisone cream on it, and it goes away. Yay, it's great. Problem is that that's a suppression. It's actually not going away because remember, disease is an erratic static vibration. And that rash on the baby may, sometimes, not always, but will probably, if it's not really horrible and you really need to do something for that child, it'll resolve on its own because it's a birth process. There's stuff that needs to be thrown out. So it's the body trying to throw stuff out, the immune system trying to throw stuff out. You don't say, no, you're not allowed to do that, we're going to push it back in the body, because what happens later is that it becomes a respiratory problem. So now your child has asthma, and now you go and you get an inhaler, and now we're going to suppress that with the inhaler. And then it ends up either as bronchitis or a behavioral problem, or worse. And then what happens, hopefully, like what happened with me, is I'm not going to do the rounds of antibiotics anymore. It's just getting closer, and we're doing more and more frequently. I'm not going to do it anymore. There's got to be a better way. So that's the time that a lot of moms find a homeopath. And then the homeopath does the chronology to figure out, okay, what happened? Tell me about the pregnancy. What kind of cravings did you have? What kind of traumas did you have? What kind of interests did you have? And then the chronology of the baby. Well, baby had eczema, and then got the asthma, and so on. And you do the chronology with the symptoms, and then you prescribe a holistic, individualized medicine, homeopathic remedy for the baby, mental, emotional, and physical, how that baby expresses, and then it just goes back through until, not even a baby anymore. The child's probably 7 years old. And he never knew he had a rash, but now he gets the rash back again after the respiratory system heals up. And the rash comes back, and then you let it alone, and it will eventually clear up on its own. And you reintroduce the remedy as needed, to keep the process going, but only as needed, and you match the state. So that's the way that works. And not only physical problems with suppression, but the mental, emotional. There are a lot of people now who are suffering from anxiety. It seems to be an epidemic. Anxiety and way too much stress, and people who are on a lot of psych drugs, and talk about suppression. A good example of this is an experience that I had that was really struck me. It was at the orientation for homeopathy school. And not even the class, she never followed through with it, but she was a firefighter's wife, and her husband was killed in 9/11. And she decided she wanted to go to homeopathy school. And she told the story in the orientation about her three friends. Her three friends lost their husbands in 9/11 as well. And she said they were all depressed and in a horrible way, as you can imagine. And she said, I never cried. I never cried. And they went and they got an antidepressant. And now it was like 3 years later, 2005, it happened in 2001. And she said, I went to a homeopath and I got a homeopathic remedy. And the first thing that happened, the day after I took the remedy, I cried my eyes out. And she said, they are still stuck in place. They have not processed the grief. They're still stuck in their grief. I know, because they're my friends. And she said, and I can move on. She said, I miss my husband, but, life goes on, and I can be happy, and I'm not stuck, and I can cry when I want to now. I thought, wow, that was fascinating. So it works on mental, emotional, and physical. And people will ask me, how do you work with people who have had XYZ diagnosis? It really doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. It makes absolutely no difference, because in homeopathy, you heal the person, not the disease. The person heals themselves. You just help get rid of that dark cloud, that static vibration that's just plaguing that person, that's running in a continual loop to keep the body from being bombarded. And then eventually what happens is that now you're not on autopilot. The fight or flight, the hormones that are just sort of triggered automatically now into thinking certain things, now your brain has a chance to rewire itself. And this isn't the sort of terminology that people use in homeopathy school at all. I use it because I've been trying to figure out a way to actually describe what goes on in the body, and people don't get homeopathy. It's like, oh, it's wonderful, and you take the remedy and just everything gets better. But how does it work? Well, it just stimulates the immune system. Well, what? How does that work? Well, there's a gentleman, a lot of people actually, who are turning this into a science, a real bona fide science, neuroimmuno blah, blah, something. Dr. Joe Dispenza. Have you ever heard of Joe Dispenza? Yes, great guy. Well, he's the guy who understands all of this in spades, and he knows how to describe and he can clock it. I mean, he can measure the changes in the brain when you go into a meditative state. He doesn't use homeopathy. He helps you change your energy. He is able to help people heal themselves from traumatic brain injury. I mean, anything can heal. He healed himself. His back was broken in 8 or 9 places during a marathon, and he went ass over tea kettle actually on a bike and broke his back. And they said, you're going to have rods put in your back. And he was a chiropractor at the time. And he said, nobody's putting rods in my back. They said, okay, I'm glad I'm not you. You're going to be on your, you're going to be laying in bed flat for 10.5 months while it hopefully will heal. And he thought, well, I got nothing better to do. I heard the man tell this story actually at a conference in Hawaii. He said, I had nothing better to do, and I knew that the mind could heal the body. So, and I knew about anatomy, and I knew what the vertebrae were, and I knew which vertebrae were broken. So what I did was concentrated on the top one and pictured it healthy. And then I'd go to the second one. But he said what happens with the mind is that it's like a dog. It wants to go over there. No, come back, sit, and this is the way he tells it. Come back, no, sit. And he said he would do it and he would practice it. And if he could only get to the second one and his mind would go over here, he said he would start at the top again. Finally, he was able to actually go all the way, concentrating on it and not deviating and going someplace else. He was out of that bed in 2.5 months. And he said, that's it, I'm out of bed. And they said, what the hell happened? Nobody could believe he healed himself. Now, this is changing everything by your thought. Now, with homeopathy, it's a whole lot easier, and hopefully none of us will ever have an injury like that we have to practice on. But you can use homeopathy to actually do the same thing. You just read it by, you get a homeopath that knows what they're doing, and, they can give you the right holistic homeopathic remedy, reintroduce it at the right time, and you will heal of all sorts of things. If anybody here was interested in doing homeopathy, here's the trick though. If you have not been to school to become a trained homeopath, you should never work on chronic problems, because you're just going to suppress the symptoms, and that's not good, because it will not really help. It'll help a little bit, but it's not going to do it. So if anybody has a chronic problem, find a professional homeopath to work with that person. But things like that are acute problems, the definition of an acute problem is an illness that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's like the flu and colds, and it resolves on its own. Trauma, you bump your knee, whatever. And this neat little thing this is like the top 10 remedies for flu, and it gives you a little description and the name of the remedy. And these are remedies that are typical remedies that you can find in like Whole Foods, in the little blue vials made by Boron or Highland. Some people have Highland, stores have Highland. So we got 10 remedies for the flu. 30C potency is a good one to use, and that's pretty much what's available. They sell 6C as well, but the 30C, stick with that. And then there's a description in here, what is homeopathy, so you can compare it to what I said and see which one you like better. It'll add a little bit more to the story, I'm sure. And then there's ear infections. Do-it-yourself learning heals ear infections. And it's always good to use a mind symptom too, like if your child has a cold and is normally really cheerful, what you would do, but now when he has a cold, he's gotten really irritable. Irritability is now a symptom. And when you prescribe, what you do and figure out which remedy is good, you need to have, if you can, 3 really solid symptoms that you can hang your hat on. It's like the three-legged stool. It's not going to work if you only have 2 legs. That was the way they taught us. You got to have 3. Look at the tripod. So if somebody has a sore throat, that's not a symptom. Big deal. It's a sore throat. I mean, there's so many. Every remedy is going to treat a sore throat, but how does that person what does it feel like? It's burning, or it feels like somebody's stabbing me, or it's scratchy, or it's making me cough. It tickles. And my throat feels really full. Those are individualized symptoms that are important. So you write that down. So now you got irritability, and you've got stabbing pain or burning pain in the throat. Let's say. I'm really cold. Oh my God, I can't get warm, but my head is so hot. My head is hot, and you can feel the face. It may feel hot, but it doesn't matter. If it feels hot to that person, it's hot. Hot head, really cold, and thirsty for like small sips of water. And you notice, because you pay attention to everything, like just a little sip and then puts it down, and then goes back to it, takes a small sip and puts it down. Thirsty for small sips of water, which is different than, could you get me another one? And just drinking it down. That's a symptom as well. Or, do you have any lemonade? I really want to have lemonade. All right. So the small sips of water, burning pain in the throat, really, really cold, hot head, that's arsenicum. And I don't even know if arsenicum is in here, but those are the symptoms of there it is, arsenicum album. Great prostration with extreme chilliness and a thirst for frequent sips of warm drinks. The eyes and nose stream with watery, acrid discharges. Feels irritable and anxious. So you can feel pretty comfortable if those are 3 strong symptoms that person has described that you've observed, and you can give them arsenicum album. What you do is with the vials, they're little tiny vials about big around. I should have brought one, and you take sometimes now you can turn the cap, and then you pull it out, and the pellets will fall into the cap. Or sometimes you just pull it out, and then you have to put it in. You don't put it in your hand first. You put it in the cap, and from the cap to the mouth. Because the sugar pellets are not there you go. And this is not typical of boron. This is just with a cap. So you have to pour it into the cap and then straight in the mouth. And no, you just let it dissolve. The pellets are just sugar pellets, but they're a carrier for the liquid. There's thank God, a documentary that finally we all financed it, and we homeopaths financed it. There's a documentary called, I think it's called Only One Drop, Just One Drop, Just One Drop. When these are made, and this was made at Washington Homeopathic, I think. There are homeopathic pharmacies around the world, and when you order a remedy that isn't typically available in a store locally, they put the sugar pellets in the thing, and then they take the tincture that they make that has the remedy in it, and they put 1 drop in the bottle. That's it, and it soaks into and adheres to the pellets. So it doesn't have to dissolve all the way. You put the pellets in your mouth, and it will. It goes. Where does it go? I don't know, but it works. So you can chew the pellets, but don't swallow. Don't take any water for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Don't eat anything for 10 or 15 minutes, and then you wait and you watch. Wait about 15 minutes to a half an hour, about a half an hour if you're new at this, and then you watch and you observe and you see if that person's getting better, and your child, and if he or she is not getting better, after half an hour, try the same remedy again, and then wait another half hour. And if it's not working, I mean, they say try it, some literature says try it 6 times. I would never do that. It doesn't work after an hour, go to another one. See if you can figure out some other symptoms. And then you just keep trying it. You're not going to hurt anybody. The only way you can hurt someone with a homeopathic remedy is if you give it repeatedly, all the time. Here, take it every 15 minutes. You're going to hurt somebody because that's energy. It's a state. You're matching the state of the person. That's the goal. So once that state is gone, you're going to give that person the state and it's not going to be pretty. It's not good. So it's the frequency that you don't want to do. Do it infrequently. You only do it again. You redose when you see that the child's better. And then if they start to fall back a little bit, that's when you know that it's time to give another dose. And then keep them quiet, feed them really good food, because it's all, all part of it. You got to do that to enhance and to help, the healing process, and keep them quiet and don't let them run around. The minute they start to feel better, they're going to run around anyway, right? Okay, so that's how homeopathy. Let me get that back to you before I steal it from you. Thank you. Fevers. Fevers are important. Fevers are a good thing. It's not a disease state. This is your immune system trying to kill the organisms. You don't put out a fever unless it's like 106. I mean, a little kid with 105, just watch them, but it's okay. It really is okay. If it gets really crazy, then you want to, cool it down a little bit. But a fever is good. Back in 1917, during the huge worldwide influenza epidemic in the world, people were dying of the same organism in America as were dying simultaneously on the other side of the world. It was really amazing how viruses work. There were 22 homeopathic medical schools in the United States back at that time, and these were medical doctors, and they were practicing homeopathy, and they were teaching homeopathy. Homeopathic medical colleges. This talk is not about what happened to them, but they were all put out. And they died out. Not died out, but they were killed. In any event, closed. During the influenza epidemic, though, in America, there were homeopathic hospitals. And the people who had the flu in the homeopathic hospitals, only 10% died of the patients. And the ones that died, and there's literature, somebody wrote a book about it, there are documents that showed this. The ones that died, the majority of the 10% died because they were transferred from the other, the medical, straight medical hospitals and they ended up with pneumonia. It was too far gone. Somebody had given them aspirin. And they were giving aspirin in the medical hospitals, and they were bringing down the fever. And then the virus was running rampant, and they died. You don't want to reduce a fever. You want to let it rip, and you try to enhance it and keep the person comfortable. But if you've got a fever, I gave arsenicum, actually, that example. I gave arsenicum to a friend of mine who had a really bad cold or the flu. I can't remember what it was. And right after she took it, she spiked a fever. And I said, good, don't do anything. She said, I just want to go to bed. Great. And she got up in the morning and it was completely gone, she said. It can work like magic when you match the right remedy. And if anybody ever tells you, oh, I tried homeopathy, it doesn't work, it always works when you match the right remedy, when you match the right vibration. It's got to be it's the law of similars. And how the law of similars works, and this is the scientific part of it, in the law of physics, I mean, you have a sound vibration, you've got a low vibration, and you've got a high vibration. And when you overlay a similar or like vibration, it cancels it out. That's exactly what happens in the body. It's like a mirror image or something of the frequency vibration, and it's gone. Now, the differences in the potencies, 30C is good for acutes. There's 200C, and then there's like 1M, which are the typical, and there's everything in between, but we pretty traditionally just use the 30C, 200C, 1M, and then there are others that are different than that. They're liquid for certain things. But a 1M is, and 200C are potencies that are really shouldn't use for acutes if you're a layperson. They're determined by how that person expresses and what level they're on, so to speak, which is another conversation. And a 200C or 1M, and again, you get farther away, the deeper it goes. So depending on what the pathology is and how intense they are and all of that determines the potency. And then it goes in and it cleans house. There you go. Thank you.